Hello, and welcome to Trans Truth, the podcast dedicated to dispelling myths, fear, and ignorance about transgender people. Along the way, we'll be sharing items of interest to the transgender community, from political and news events to health, fashion, and beauty. And now, let's have a look at some news items that should be of interest to our listeners. In a segment on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday, July 23rd, Dr. Marcy Bowers addressed some of the disinformation being spread by the GOP and other right-wing hate groups for political gain. Bowers is one of the most respected transgender surgeons in the world and the president of the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, or WPATH. The WPATH publishes the recognized standards of care used by the vast majority of caregivers who provide gender-affirming care. Dr. Bowers started out addressing the popular myth that we are seeing an explosion of people identifying as transgender, while acknowledging that the rise in incidence is true. She explains it thus.
Keep in mind, trans identities have been with us since the antiquities. I mean, the time of the Bible, and in literature and art history, I mean, there's examples of people throughout. So experts feel that the incidence has actually never changed. But what we are seeing is more people feeling comfortable coming out. And so that explains the rise.
She explains that the transgender population is vulnerable and deserves to have access to appropriate medical care that is supported by all available evidence.
Well, we have decades of experience with trans treatment overall, and that shows unequivocally that treatment is beneficial. But in this age group, we've only been treating with hormone blockers, which is the point of real controversy that people are after since the late 2000s. But in that time, there has been research, especially from groups in the Netherlands, but increasingly here as well, and experience with this. And the results are similar. We're seeing certainly very high levels of satisfaction, improved self-esteem, reduced suicidality.
As with all our stories, a link to this one, actually a YouTube video of the Face the Nation segment, will be available in the episode notes at www.transtruth.info. Also appearing on Face the Nation, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy appeared to explain why his administration is suing 3 school districts that required teachers to tell parents if their child is showing signs of changing gender identity, explaining that he is taking this action, quote, because it's the right thing to do to protect these precious young people, unquote. While we here at Trans Truth recognize that it is tempting to hide behind the popular notion that all parents should be informed of such things about their children, the sad reality is that in many of these cases, the child will come to harm, both emotionally and even physically, when parents are ill-informed and ill-equipped to handle such news. In a similar story being reported in the Los Angeles Times, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, was actually cut off at a public meeting in Chino on Thursday after speaking out against a proposal that would, you guessed it, notify parents about students' gender identities. Thurmond called such actions a safety risk to LGBTQ students who may not be in homes where they can be safe. It would seem that the notion that parents should be allowed to decide for themselves if they want to beat the gay out of their kids is a popular one with the board of the Chino Unified School District, who voted 4-1 to approve the notification requirement. Said Thurmond, quote, With LGBTQ plus youth around the country under attack, the school board has put their most vulnerable students in harm's way with their dangerous vote to forcibly out trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming youth without their consent, unquote, said Equality California Executive Director Tony Wang on Friday. Equality California has said that the policy is the result of blatant homophobia and transphobia. The Telegraph reports, in the wake of a transgender contestant recently being crowned Miss Netherlands, the Miss Italy contest will not, quote, jump on the glittery bandwagon of trans activism, unquote, and will not allow transgender entrants. With so many possible punchlines about beauty pageants and glitter, we're just wondering what unfair advantage the Italian pageant officials fear from trans women. And in the you can't make this stuff up category, AP News reports that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis wants to investigate its investments in the company that makes Bud Light because of the conservative backlash over the whole Dylan Mulvaney thing. To be fair, if I held stock in a publicly traded company that led with their chin in the culture wars the way Anheuser-Busch did, I too would be looking for the scalp that was responsible for tanking the value of my shares. Investment bankers play for keeps, and someone is going down for this. Now, that said, I have to believe that the whole thing would have been largely a tempest in a teapot if Anheuser-Busch had any integrity and stood up for the LGBTQ community. Instead, they allowed themselves to be cowed by the public stunts of a couple of washed-up musical artists. If you're going to play the social responsibility game, please have the balls to stay in it. Well, hello again, and welcome back to Trans Truth. I am Kelly, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host.
I'm Jeri Ann.
And today, being the third episode in our series we're calling Our Stories, we are joined by an online friend of ours, Sara Doepner. Say hello, Sara.
Hello.
We always start off with the most cliche of questions about our story, and that is, what was your earliest memory of realizing you were different?
Oh, heavens. It was very likely in that 5 and 6 year old range. And in fact, I can tell you exactly the moment. I'd been over to a cousin's house and we'd been playing on new equipment that she'd just won in a lottery of some sort. And after spending the day running around and getting dirty, our parents tossed us in the bathtub together while they went out and drank coffee or had drinks or whatever. And I came out of that bath absolutely shattered because my cousin told me that she could be a mermaid, but I couldn't because she was a girl and I was a boy. I was devastated.
It's interesting to me how commonly we remember that single moment. Not everybody, but so many people seem to say the same thing. Yeah, I remember it distinctly. So, where did it go from there? What was the cultural environment like for you at various stages of your journey?
Oh my. Well, I'm one of our late bloomers, late blooming boomers, as it were. I just turned 74 last week, the week before. So I grew up in a very conservative world. People that were differently gendered or had different sexual attractions were demeaned. They were diminished in all sorts of ways, misrepresented. And so I learned pretty early on that the best thing for me to do was to, keep my head down and keep it all to myself. It wasn't until I was, probably in junior high when I was finally allowed to be spending time alone at home for extended periods that I started looking in drawers that weren't mine.
No, that's another. Isn't that another cliche story?
It is.
What, if you don't mind my asking, where did you grow up?
Salt Lake City.
Okay, so fairly conservative in that neck of the woods. Still is to this day.
Oh my.
So, Sara, you're still in Utah, is that correct?
Yes, I've lived in Salt Lake Valley for, oh my gosh, since I was probably 8 years old.
So in the 60s, you started experimenting, exploring your suppressed gender.
Yeah, probably in the late 50s, but early 60s was when I really got going.
And how did that work for you? Were you able to spend much time?
No, no. I was always frightened. I got caught. Which turned out to be a weird situation, because this is before there's counseling. My stepfather wasn't an aggressive fellow, and so I got a stern talking to that I shouldn't try these things anymore. This is not right for me, and they made arrangements with my father to send me to stay with him and his new wife in Idaho for part of the summer, basically to take me away from the temptations and provide more guidance. I got up there and they put me in a basement room that had a wardrobe in there and never came to check on me. And there was this blue dress that fit me perfectly. I could hardly wait to get back up there the subsequent summers.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, they threw Brer Rabbit in the briar patch.
Yeah,
they certainly did.
Not very effective conversion therapy.
No, it wasn't.
I have always wanted to meet Brer Rabbit.
He set the bar high.
From then until now, how did you manage to express your gender identity? Take your time. We got lots of tape.
Oh dear. It was intermittent. Since I didn't have sisters. I had one sibling, a brother who was almost 8 years older than me. So basically, I was raised as an only child. My closest cousins I saw a couple times a year, and I was very shy, so I didn't have girls who were friends in my life. So I didn't get much of a chance to explore. I guess I've always been pretty adaptable. The dysphoria that I felt was never really, really strong. It was always there. It was consistent, but it wasn't so strong that I absolutely had to deal with it right away. And so it wasn't, after I left the family house, probably toward the end of my first year of college, I, again, didn't have any opportunities because now I had roommates. And so I just kept it suppressed, I guess. And I was building a little bit of a libido on my own and wanting to find ways to satisfy that in a typical male fashion. And with not a hell of a lot of luck, but again, one of those things been pretty consistent in my life. Sex drive has never been, one of those things that pushed me along. Just like dysphoria has never pushed me along or pulled me wherever I was going. So I've been very fortunate in that. But eventually I found the woman that I was going to spend my life with, and we settled down and settled in, eventually got a place where neighbors wouldn't walk in on us, but I kept it from her. And she was a teacher, had summers off, and she'd go visit her sister in Colorado or San Diego, wherever she was living at the time. And that would give me an opportunity to dress from time to time. And that pattern pretty well continued, where I would keep it to myself, find those opportunities to dress, right on up into my mid-40s, probably. We ended up adopting kids, and fortunately my wife would just love taking them to church, and I'm an atheist, so I wouldn't go, and that would give me a couple of hours, 3 hours, something like that on Sundays that I could look forward to. So pretty well kept it in balance. I was going to say, and then I had enough other things going on in my life that it was, I was able to distract myself. And I think having those good distractions were just absolutely critical to my life, whether it was work or family, or I went backpacking a lot. Utah's a wonderful place to backpack for adventures. So those things worked.
Yep. I know exactly what you mean. I was an adrenaline junkie from an early age, and it's a good distraction.
Yeah.
when you're so scared you've got sewing machine knees.
Yeah.
Well, Sara,
Sara,
you beat me to it. I was going to ask you if you used distractions, because that's very common. It's a common story. I know probably hundreds of trans women, and that's a common thread that weaves through our stories, is some kind of distraction. And a lot of times it results in becoming just hyper successful in the profession and things like that. Also, like Kelly referenced, it could lead to macho things.
Right. Yeah. And I was never trying to prove my masculinity. I kind of fell into a caregiving role in the family. I mean, I was supposed to be the enforcer as well, but I also did a lot of the caregiving and taking care of the kids. I have a Facebook friend here in Utah that I've visited with a lot, and she talks about how at work, having not transitioned, presenting male the whole time, that she kind of became the group girl, taking care, reminding people of birthdays, and making sure there was cake, and the break room was clean. She sort of took those on. When I would go camping with friends, if it wasn't a backpack trip, I was the one cooking. I would bring the table and set up the bar, those sorts of things. So like I say, I wasn't really trying to prove my masculinity, and it would have been a foolish thing anyway. My career was a civilian professional support staff for local law enforcement, where I'd be doing data analysis and running a small office, doing different types of analysis, intelligence analysis and crime pattern analysis, things like that. But we were surrounded by police officers, and you don't want to challenge them to a masculinity contest because they will win.
For sure. So how do you identify today? I mean, you can use labels or not, but tell us,
trans woman.
who
I'm
you
a trans
are.
woman.
Okay.
It's simplest thing for me. It doesn't take a whole lot of definition, or the other turn of phrase that I've heard recently that I like is, I'm a woman with a transgender background.
There you go.
I like that. When did you decide to go all in and transition socially?
Fairly recently. My wife was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer in, it would be 10 years ago. No, she died 10 years ago. So it would have been about 15, 16 years ago. And I retired shortly after, again, to be a caregiver. And so that really took all of my time and effort. However, it was just shortly after she found out that I was wearing women's clothing. And so we had the discussion, and it was a wonderful, wonderful week there. Let me digress momentarily because it's a great story. She came home unexpectedly and caught me, and I had to fess up about what was going on. She had to leave in a hurry. And before she left, she says, "We're going to talk about this." And she left.
Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I bet that was an anxious
It was,
interval.
yeah, it was about 4 days later. I came out of part of the house into the living room, and she was sitting on the couch. And she looked at me and patted the couch next to her and says, "Come sit down. We're going to talk now." My heart was, right up here in my throat. And she said, "Okay, I've been looking around. I've been doing some reading, and I found your stash of things in the basement. And some of those things are way too nice to be in a duffel bag. You should hang them in the closet."
Oh my gosh.
I just about cried. And from there we proceeded to set boundaries. I did my best to keep within those boundaries. I may have failed a couple times, but for the most part, for the next, for the rest of her life, I tried not to violate any of that. Anyway, so she passed away about 10 years ago. And I had a whole bundle of different issues to deal with. The grief, finances, all of these things that were loose ends in life that I was trying to figure out how to take care of. And it was driving me nuts. So I got some professional help. I went to see a counselor, a therapist, and I picked one who was on the list through the local Pride Center as being experienced in gender counseling as well. And I came out to him in the very first meeting saying, "There's a whole raft full of issues that I need to deal with, and among them is gender identity. I need to figure out how to deal with this." So together we worked through, pulling one thread out and working on it and resolving it, and pulling the next one out and working on it and resolving it. I had people in my home off and on for the next few years. But eventually I was living here on my own and spending more and more time dressed. And I says, "Oh, this is nonsense. It's not going anywhere." I called and made an appointment with my endocrinologist, and 3 months later went in and got a prescription, started taking estradiol and Spiro the next day, I kept it mostly secret, but I started coming out within about 6 months. I started coming out to my closest circle, my family and my closest friends. And then just, I think prior to the pandemic, I came out on Facebook, and I haven't turned back.
Well, that kind of leads us nicely into my next question was, which is, do you have any supportive
Oh, yeah.
friends, family,
Yes,
whatever, now
absolutely.
that
I've
you've
been
come out?
incredibly fortunate. I guess we raised the kids right, because actually they knew before my wife did.
Really?
My middle son was on the family computer and exploring and found links or conversation threads, whatever. I'm not sure exactly what it was. That and he discovered that I was at least cross-dressing and possibly transgender. Probably 2 to 3 years before my wife found out. He shared it with his siblings, and I never heard a word about it from
Wow.
them through the rest of their teenage years. It wasn't until I came out to my daughter, I'd called her up. I said, I'm going to have to do this. And I sat down across the table from her and said, you need to know I'm transgender. And she looked at me and says, well, we were wondering when you were going to tell us.
Oh my goodness.
What was that like? What?
I was gobsmacked. And of course, I started asking questions and found the background story. So within a day, I spent time with each of the two of my sons who I could get to, and got their stories and talked to them, and I thanked them for holding on to it, because I got after them more than one time when they were kids, and it would have been something that would be real easy for a teenager to throw back in a parent's face.
Yeah.
They didn't, and I don't think they were reluctant because they feared what kind of a response they would get. I think it was more along the lines of we'd raised them properly.
I'd say so.
So kudos to raising kids to respect diversity. So anybody that can do that, my hat's off to you. My friends, evidently I curated some really good friends, and I told them, and they were surprised because I was pretty good at being stealthy. They didn't expect it, but
Sara,
Wow.
speaking of stealth, Kelly and I have a mutual friend, and she was the primary subject of the documentary Our Dad, Danielle.
Uh-huh.
And in the documentary, Danielle says that the CIA needs to hire trans women because they're expert at deception.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
so good at
And
pretending to
disguise.
be somebody else.
Yeah, I practiced keeping secrets when I worked for the police department, and that was,
That's
there were
what
people-
makes you so good in that
Yeah,
job. You're
well-
a trans woman, girl.
yeah, it must have been.
You kept secrets for all your life.
Yeah, I was very good at it. Covered my tracks for the most part. I mean, there were a couple of breaches to my perimeter security, but no, we did okay.
Let's talk about that. Were there, once you decided to come out, was there any negative blowback from any direction, family, friends, whatever?
There were a few relatives who I'd kind of locked horns with in the past over politics. I'm liberal. I'm a lefty. I'm pleased with that. Have been for years. Probably why my friends supported me. But I had some family members who were and still are very conservative, and the worst that I saw was mean, generalized anti-transgender memes on Facebook. Nothing directed at me specifically. Okay. But, and so I just said, well, I don't need this. I've lived my life pretty well without this person. So I can ignore them.
Well, speaking of social media, how have you found the media's treatment of transgender people and non-binary people, especially in the last couple of years?
Well, the the obvious part is there are some very, very loud voices who get a lot of attention as they rile up their base.
That's it.
But they are a minority. The rest of the public information sphere seems to understand there are shades of gray, and not all of this fear-based stuff has value. But they're fighting an uphill battle, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, we've done an entire episode on how all of that noisy, I should say, all of that noise coming from the right is politically motivated. I'm sure that there are politicians and right wing activists that actually believe the things they're spewing, but in large part it's calculated to get votes and nothing else.
Yeah. In Utah, I've watched. A very close friend is a trans woman who has turned out to be a spokesperson for Equality Utah, and she's always up there in the hearings on Capitol Hill when they want expert testimony. And there are members of our legislature who are very anti-transgender, and I'm not sure exactly why. I think they believe it. I think they believe what they're saying, to the point that when they are presented with facts, with real data, with real examples of people's heartbreak when they are taken off, when they can no longer follow their path, they ignore that in favor of some wackadoodle who comes up and says, oh, I was a transgender woman and I detransitioned, and ever since then I can't orgasm, none of this stuff works anymore in my life. And there's no validation, there's no documentation, but it was a message that appealed to them. My state legislator has a transgender granddaughter, and she voted for the bill that banned gender-affirming care for trans kids in the state. So I don't know how to deal with that.
It makes no sense at all. And you're right. I think your observation that they just don't want to hear the truth is very accurate. It's maybe call it cognitive dissonance or whatever, but they would rather believe that rare detransition story. And let's be honest, it does happen, but it happens less than 1% of the time. And as one clinician pointed out to me a while back, any medical intervention that has a 99% success rate is a winner. Is enviable. Is enviable in all of healthcare, and that's what evidence-based gender-affirming care does. It's the only effective treatment for gender dysphoria. So
well, and again, I can support that with my own story. I've been journaling for many years. And prior to starting my hormone therapy, it was not uncommon for me to be writing several paragraphs to several pages in that journal every day. And within about a month after I'd started my gender affirming care, the changing my hormones, it had dropped down to 2 or 3 sentences sometimes. I just looked, I didn't write a single thing in June of this year.
Yeah, same here.
In that-
The torment, the things that you've just got to say something about, even if it's just in your private journal, just seems to go away.
Yeah.
Sara,
Yeah.
Kelly and I do this podcast for several reasons. First of all, we're all about human rights and social justice, and we will do our best to expose the lies, legends, and myths that are promoted to harm trans people. But also, we want people to know that they're not alone. I can remember when, before the internet, I thought I was the only freak on the planet. You know, it was somewhat gratifying to find out that there were other freaks just like me. So then as time went on, and I realized that there's no cure for this, I accepted it. But it still is comforting to know that there's someone out there dealing with, if not the same, similar things that you are. Now,
Yeah.
Having said that, we've talked about and talked around transition, and we all have our own form of transition. I believe that we will eventually do whatever we need to do to meet our individual needs. Now, as I recall, you have to pull up short with surgery, some procedures because of health. Is that?
Yeah. Well, part of it is. Part of it is my age. I have, and my bank account. I'll be honest with that one. I had a pretty sizable 401k when I retired, but I retired to take care of my wife. I was 58. We still needed the insurance because cancer therapy is incredibly expensive. So maintaining the insurance is where my 401k went. Fortunately, I made it through all of that stuff, but now I have limited savings in place. So once I turned 65, I was on Medicare, and Medicare will cover some surgeries. Breast augmentation, I took advantage of that. An orchiectomy, I took advantage of that. And I've had some work done on my face from my upper lip, north. I would like to do, more on the bottom part of my face, but I don't think my budget will justify that.
Okay, what I'm getting at is, are you at peace with how far you have transitioned?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm much happier now, and I'm able to pay more attention to other issues. Last year, I had back surgery, an L3, L4, L5 fusion, and that has changed my life significantly. I still have some foot problems that I'm still getting treatment on, but I'm feeling better than I have in a long time, and being to where I'm not consumed by wanting to meet this ideal Sara has allowed me to focus on these other things that are also important in my life, whether it's my physical health or relationships with other people or being creative. Those things are all more forward in my life now.
That is exactly where I hope you go with this. There's a misconception that there's a golden ring that you reach for, and you have to complete a whole list of procedures and surgeries and things like that. in order to have a successful transition. But transition is as unique as your fingerprint. And,
absolutely.
And you do what you need to do. But you know that you have transitioned as far as you need to when you are able to focus on life, whether it's health, hobbies. For me, it's volunteering and DIY projects and things like that. So I want our listeners to know that you seek your own truth and you do what is necessary for you to do so that you can turn and face the world and start living, start doing life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's along those lines. One thing that I've noticed here recently, I'm still involved in a couple of different groups, and I have a friend who comes over to my house to change, people who are cross-dressers. And the two people that I'm thinking of do an absolutely wonderful temporary transition, and it meets their needs.
Yes.
And they're happy with that. They have no desire to do any physical transition. And all the way along this long path of mine, from when I accepted that I was transgender back in about 2001, I kept looking for that place where I would finally be satisfied. And so I took a lot of very small steps with a long time in between them, hoping that I was going to be able to match what I saw in a lot of other people in my world. And, I finally got there.
Yep.
Well, listen, Kelly's about to explode over there, so let's hear what she has to say.
So, Sara, I wanted to jump back and talk about how you were able to afford some of your surgeries. I think you mentioned some facial feminization surgery, top surgery, and an orchi, and that those were covered by Medicare. Is that regular Medicare or Medicare Advantage?
No, it was my facial surgery I had to pay for out of pocket.
All right, good. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah. Medicare still considers that cosmetic surgery, even though it's the one thing that everybody can see.
Right.
They couldn't tell if I was wearing breast forms or what I had underneath my skirt, but they could see my face. And I thought that was a lot more important, but that's the rules that they set. The other two surgeries were covered by Medicare, and I have a supplemental insurance that covers the difference in the costs of a variety of different medical procedures. So
thank you. That's good information for
I'm sure
it's important for
it's important for our listeners to understand that what is available even through Medicare is not a blanket offering across the nation, that it differs from state to state and even within regions of the state.
Yeah, well, it's what what your provider will try to get them to pay for, because they're like any other insurance company. They'll say no if they have the opportunity.
Sure.
Sure.
That's the business model.
And Medicaid is a totally different thing. I don't know about Medicaid, and I know there are a lot of state level restrictions on that in some of the red states are really trying to limit even more. Medicare has a lot of national guidelines that they haven't been able to wiggle their way into yet.
They're trying. So, what, if any, were some of your biggest challenges you've faced since choosing to live as your authentic self?
Boy, accepting that most people really don't care, one way or the other.
They really don't they? That's true.
No, it was that was probably one of the biggest surprises, was the level of acceptance, both among those people in my circle, people well beyond former coworkers, or family members from whoever, wherever, they just pretty much said, "Oh, wow, okay, well, let's move on." The folks at my local grocery store, where I go and I get my prescriptions filled, and everybody seemed to just jump onto it really well.
That's so cool.
And that was okay. Salt Lake City, Salt Lake Valley, and some of the nearby resort communities up in the mountains are in Utah, but not of it. I don't know what kind of response I would have gotten in some of the rural areas or some of the the more conservative communities,
like down in Moab.
Well, Moab would be good, actually.
Really?
Moab is Moab is a liberal stronghold.
I did not know
environmental
that.
sense. Yeah, but over the mountain in coal country, it's going to be different. And same thing down in southern part of the state of Utah. There's an HBO series called We Are Here, where 3 drag queens go and find local people who are willing to do drag, and they train them and listen to their story and share their stories, and then put on a drag show. Well, one of the episodes was in St. George, Utah, and the residents of that town, not all of them, but the ones who have power, raised holy hell about that. They were not happy. But recently a judge said, no, you can't. This is free speech. They can do what they want.
I should think, yeah.
So that's one of the wonderful things that I am seeing, despite all of the news that's going through, is the trend in the courts to reverse a lot of these bad laws, these at least temporarily, while more information comes through.
I agree, and we've mentioned that on the news segment on this show a couple of times. For the most part, every time one of these laws has been placed up for judicial review, they've been sued about it. The judge has at least granted a temporary injunction. That's been turned back temporarily again a couple of times on appeal. But even in one case that I'm thinking of, the judge who removed the temporary injunction said, "Yeah, I expect this to be thrown out anyway because the argument presented by the plaintiffs is so compelling." So yeah, I think in the long run, all of this political grandstanding is going to get thrown out by the courts. Now's your chance to brag a little bit. Do you have any biggest accomplishments or proudest moments in your journey?
Boy, that's a real good question. It all goes back to just being accepted. Nothing really spectacular, because I've changed, but I haven't changed all that much. So the things that I was doing before, I'm doing now. So the biggest thing is, the lack of interference, I guess. There was one thing that my timing was really good when I applied to get my birth certificate corrected. I was born in Montana. And so this was during the pandemic, and it took forever because everybody was working from home. But I got that done before Montana decided they didn't want to let people change their birth certificates. So I did get my birth certificate. So all of my paperwork, my driver's license, my passport, my birth certificate, all of those things, I'm still working on getting bills and things like that changed over, but all that is good. I did have one experience here recently. I've also been getting some voice therapy, which was offered through the University of Utah Speech and Language Clinic. And part of that is so they can train future clinicians. So I'm getting a chance to talk to graduate students on a regular basis as they try to run, a group through different exercises. But the major part of that is I went to a writing group here a couple of weeks ago, and it turned out that it was just myself and one other gentleman who older than me by 8 or 10 years, it seemed. And we chatted for quite a while, and we exchanged some stories about how people's perception of events is often very different from those of other people who were there at the same time. And something in what I told him about an experience I'd had when I was young made him respond that, well, you have to understand that boys and girls grow up with different perceptions of some of these things. So he had gendered me as female, and he'd mansplained to me.
That's a good sign, isn't it?
So I wasn't about to get militant over that. I was tickled.
One final question: would you do anything differently, knowing what you know now? But if you had to go back and go through the same environments, would you do anything different?
Boy, I might, but it would deny everything else that got me here.
That's a really good observation. I like that.
I'm built on a foundation that includes all of that negative stuff, all of the waiting, all of the years that I spent being supportive of other people and considerate of their experiences, learning from other people in my community. And I can't say enough about the cross-dressing and transgender community that I've fallen into over the years. There are absolutely delightful, wonderful, supportive, loving people out there who made this part of my journey so much easier. Just by letting me know that they liked me for who I was, who I am, and that I'm not alone, and would listen to me without being judgmental. It was all wonderful. I don't know that I could have found them before the internet. But however I found them, I'm sure glad that I did.
Amen to that. Jeri Ann, do you have any final questions for Sara?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, Sara, do you have any questions for us?
Can I borrow $5? Wait, no, not you. Sorry.
That's a joke going on around here. Ask everybody if they'll loan you some money, and of course they'll turn you down. So, in case you win the lottery, they can't ask you for money because they already turned you down. It's a defense mechanism.
It's insurance. All right.
Well,
Sara, thank you so much for joining us and adding to our stories series. We've got at least 2 more in the hopper. And for anybody who's listening to this, reach out via our website, www.transtruth.info, or via email at info@transtruth.info. And we will make it happen. You have been listening to Trans Truth, the podcast that speaks the truth about what it means to be transgender. If you are transgender yourself, you have a friend or loved one who is transgender, or if you are simply looking to understand more about the transgender experience, We hope that you have found this episode to be informative and enlightening. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact us at info@transtruth.info. Copyright 2023 Trans Truth.